Gunfire ripped across Fort Braddock before dawn. 16 young recruits were dragged into a tower, rifles pressed to their heads. The man in charge, a Chechen warlord, gave the Americans 10 minutes before executions began. On the ground, Captain Mark Rourke was out of options. His snipers were dead, his men pinned down. So he turned to the last person anyone expected, Laura Kane, a 34-year-old janitor in gray coveralls. Rourke shoved a rifle into her hands and ordered her into the killing field. But when Laura pulled the trigger, what happened next would shatter every assumption about who she really was. Before we dive into this story, where are you watching from? Let us know in the comments. Welcome to Grateful Stories, where tales of compassion and kindness are told. Let's uncover what really happened. The first shots cracked across Fort Braddock just after sunrise. Sharp bursts of AK fire ripped through the quiet training grounds, startling soldiers who thought this was just another drill. It wasn't. Inside the armory, Laura Kane froze with a rag in her hand. For 2 years, she had scrubbed rifles and swept brass casings, unnoticed in her gray coveralls. At 34, she had mastered invisibility, blending into walls, never raising her voice. Today, there was no hiding. The radio shrieked with chaos. 16 recruits barely out of high school were trapped on the upper floors of the range tower. Their captors were Chechen militants, led by a man named Viktor Malenkov. His ultimatum was simple release, 5 imprisoned comrades, or watch the teenagers die. Captain Mark Rourke stormed through the armory doors, face red with fury. He was tall, broad-shouldered, a man known for winning battles but not for compassion. His eyes scanned for expendable options, and they found her. He barked, dragging Laura from behind the racks. "Can you run?" she stammered. "I'm just maintenance," but he cut her off, shoving a heavy vest into her arms. Ceramic plates clattered as she struggled to fit it. "Run across the open ground. Zigzag. 30 seconds is all we need." Sergeant Paul Everett, the only other survivor of Rourke's sniper team, looked horrified. "Captain, she's a civilian." Rourke didn't flinch. 16 hostages up there. We don't get angles unless someone draws fire. Do the math. Laura's breath quickened. Through the glass, she saw the tower, 8 stories of concrete, windows black with rifles aimed down. The parade ground between her and cover was 60 yards of death. Yet something stirred in her memory. Flags whipping in the wind, calculations forming unbidden in her mind. "On my mark," Rourke ordered, hand firm on her shoulder. His tone carried no sympathy. It was a sentence. She closed her eyes, whispered a name she hadn't spoken in years, then stepped into the doorway. 3, 2, 1. She bolted. Bullets erupted instantly. Concrete spat dust at her heels. Laura darted left, then right, zigzagging in broken rhythm. Her body moved like it remembered another life, dodging fire in deserts far away. A round tugged at her vest, spinning her half around, but she kept running, lungs burning. Rourke and Everett shouted positions into their comms, mapping muzzle flashes as Laura became their unwilling marker. 3rd floor, west corner, 5th floor, center. Their voices were frantic, but Laura only heard her heartbeat pounding against the vest. 10 yards from the barrier, she spotted movement on the ground. One of Rourke's fallen snipers, Corporal Trent Lawson, was crawling, bloody but alive. His rifle, an XM 2010, lay just beyond his reach. Laura's legs veered before her mind caught up. "What the hell is she doing?" Rourke shouted. She slid across gravel, grabbing the weapon. Lawson gasped. "No, don't know." But her hands moved with practiced certainty. Safety off, chamber checked, scope aligned. The rifle felt heavy, but also familiar, like an old scar. She dove behind the concrete barrier as shards flew overhead. Through the scope, the world shrank to crosshairs and wind. Distance over 100 meters. Gusts tugged left. She adjusted, almost automatically. A voice from long ago echoed in her head. Win 7 clicks. "Hold steady. Drop it." Rourke snapped over radio. "That's an order." She ignored him. Breath in. Hold! A shadow in the fifth-floor window leaned forward. Rifle poised. She squeezed. The shot thundered. The man's head snapped back, body crumpling from the frame. Gasps filled the comms. Everett whispered, "Jesus." One down. Laura adjusted again. Third-floor corner. Only a sliver of barrel visible behind concrete. Most shooters would wait. She didn't. She calculated the ricochet, angle off the interior wall, a trick she hadn't used in years. The trigger broke clean. A flash inside the room, followed by silence. Everett's voice cracked. 2. She's 2 for 2. Far above, panic rippled among the militants. Malenkov's voice growled over the frequency. "Impressive, but we still have hostages. Games are over?" In the tower's main chamber, Sophie Ramirez, a 19-year-old recruit from Arizona, was yanked to her feet. Her cheek pressed to cold glass as a gun barrel touched her temple. She whispered a prayer, tears streaking her face. Laura saw it through the scope. The executioner raised his pistol. Distance 1, 240 meters. Only 2 inches of target exposed. Sophie blocking the rest. Wind gusting harder now. Her pulse slowed. She remembered a different dawn. A desert shot no one believed possible. Fingers curled, steady. She wasn't Laura the janitor anymore. Not even Laura Kane. She was something else. The rifle cracked. The pistol exploded from the terrorist's hand, spinning away as he screamed. Sophie dropped flat on instinct. The second shot came instantly, center mass. The man folded backward, vanishing into the room. The command center erupted with disbelief. Who the hell is that shooter? Screens flickering as officers demanded answers. Colonel Dana Whitaker stared at the live feed, her jaw tight. "Not one of ours," an aide muttered. "On the ground." Rourke could only watch as the woman he had shoved into death's path dismantled the threat with precision his best men hadn't matched. His perfect record was already ash, and now his authority was crumbling with every impossible shot she fired. But the battle wasn't over. Malenkov roared through the radio, furious. "You think you've saved them? I still have 14 more. And I keep my promises." Inside the tower, terrorists dragged another hostage forward. Sophie lay trembling on the floor, spared for now, but the gun barrels turned toward the next in line. Laura shifted her scope, eyes narrowing. She knew what had to come next. The morning at Fort Braddock had begun with dust and silence. Now it was blood and thunder, and a woman who was never meant to be seen was standing at the edge of revelation. Her finger settled once more on the trigger. The next shot would decide everything. Colonel Dana Whitaker leaned over the tactical display, eyes narrowing. Every angle of the mystery shooter was caught by the drone circling overhead. When the feed zoomed closer, her face drained of color. That stance, the way the elbows tucked, the shoulder angled, the breath visibly stilled between shots. It wasn't in any manual. It belonged to one person. Soldiers watching the monitors whispered in disbelief. "No, she died in Syria. Phantom's gone." The murmurs rippled like wildfire across the command center. On the ground, Rourke approached cautiously, rifle still in hand. He barked, "Identify yourself." Laura kept her cheek against the rifle stock, ignoring him, but Colonel Whitaker's voice thundered through comms. "Stand down. Bring her in alive." Moments later, armed MPs surrounded Laura's position. Confused recruits looked on as she was ordered to strip off her coveralls. Hesitation flashed across her face before trembling hands obeyed. Beneath the gray cloth, a black tank top clung to her frame. Across her right shoulder blade stretched a tattoo, an eerie skull and a ghillie hood. A crosshair over one empty socket. Below it, the numbers 2630. Gasps spread through the ranks. The number was legend, the longest confirmed kill ever recorded by NATO. Colonel Whitaker whispered it aloud. Helmand Province, March 2020. Phantom. The name hung in the air like a ghost. Men who had served decades felt a chill down their spines. Phantom wasn't just a sniper. She was a myth, A story told to recruits to inspire and terrify. Rourke stood frozen, jaw tight. He realized the maintenance worker he had shoved into open fire wasn't just a soldier. She was the woman his own instructors had once called untouchable. "Laura Kane," Colonel Whitaker said flatly. "Or do I call you Master Sergeant Hayes?" Laura's gaze dropped to the ground. "That name's dead." The colonel didn't argue. She simply nodded to the guards. Restraints clicked shut around Laura's wrists. The crowd of soldiers stepped back in uneasy silence as the living legend was marched toward a waiting helicopter. Inside the Black Hawk, tension simmered. Laura sat between two armed escorts, chains digging into her wrists. Captain Rourke sat across from her, unable to meet her eyes. Finally, he spoke. His voice was low, almost hoarse. "I used a ghost as bait. I turned the most decorated sniper of our generation into cannon fodder." Laura's reply was cold. "Don't flatter yourself. You only did what you always do, sacrifice whoever looks weak to keep your record clean." Sergeant Everett shifted uncomfortably, glancing between them. No one else dared say a word. The rotors thumped overhead, drowning the silence with their mechanical heartbeat. Laura turned to the window, staring at the endless forest below. But her mind wasn't in North Carolina anymore. It was 3 years back. Under a desert sun, Operation Iron Anvil had been billed as routine. Extract a high-value asset from a compound in eastern Syria. 12 operators went in under Ghost Protocol, silent, precise, flawless. Everything lined up too perfectly. Guards exactly where intel said they'd be. Escape route wide open. They had walked into a trap. RPGs exploded from rooftops. Heavy fire pinned them down. Within minutes, half her team was bleeding out on the sand. Laura remembered Corporal Mason dragging her behind a wall, blood pouring from his neck. "Run," he had rasped. "You're the best shot. End this." He died seconds later. 11 men never came back. Laura had crawled away with a bullet in her shoulder and nothing else except the image of comrades screaming under fire that was never meant to be survivable. The Pentagon labeled it an ambush. She called it betrayal. When she told investigators, they dismissed her as delusional, traumatized, unstable. Her warnings became footnotes in classified files. So she disappeared. A ghost by choice this time. She found work where no one looked twice at a woman with scars sweeping floors, cleaning rifles, staying invisible. Now, in the helicopter's gray cabin, the past she buried was shackled to her wrists. Rourke leaned forward, voice breaking. "If it was betrayal, why didn't you fight harder to prove it?" Laura's eyes finally met his. "I did, but every door slammed shut. Someone powerful wanted Iron Anvil erased. The only way I stayed alive was by pretending Phantom died in Syria." Colonel Whitaker, seated near the cockpit, turned. "If that's true, do you have proof?" Laura hesitated, then gave a small, almost bitter smile. "Of course I do. You think I'd survive this long without it?" The escorts glanced at each other. Whitaker's brows furrowed. Where Laura shifted in her seat, jaw tightening, slowly, she opened her mouth and bit down against the back molar. There was a faint click. With her tongue, she eased out a false tooth and spat it into her palm. It wasn't porcelain. It was a tiny capsule, metallic and weathered. Inside, data glimmered faintly under the cabin lights. "This," she said, her voice steady, 3 years' worth of secrets. Video, audio, medical logs. Everything they did to us after the ambush. Proof that Iron Anvil wasn't an enemy plot. Proof that our own people turned us into experiments." The cabin went silent, except for the rotor beat. Rourke stared at the capsule like it was a live grenade. Whitaker's voice was low, controlled. "Experiments," Laura closed her fist around the tooth. Her eyes held no fear now, only grim certainty. They didn't want intelligence. They wanted test subjects, and 11 good men paid the price. The helicopter thundered toward Washington, carrying more than just a prisoner. It carried the ghost of Iron Anvil and the evidence to burn an empire from within. The Black Hawk touched down at Raven facility just outside Washington. From the air, it looked like nothing more than a cluster of anonymous government buildings. Underground, however, it was a labyrinth where secrets were kept and voices disappeared. Laura Kane was escorted down sterile corridors, chains rattling with each step. Guards avoided her eyes, though every man there knew the stories. Phantom, alive, in shackles. She was pushed into a conference room lit too brightly, a deliberate tactic. At the head of the table sat Deputy Director Harrison Pike of the NSA. His reputation was as cold as his smile. "Welcome back, Sergeant Hayes," Pike said smoothly, ignoring the name she now carried. "Let's talk about Iron Anvil." Colonel Dana Whitaker stood nearby, arms crossed, gaze unflinching. Captain Rourke was present too, silent, his shame written on his face. Laura sat down without speaking. Pike gestured. The proof Laura placed the metallic capsule on the table. A technician rushed forward, slotting it into a reader. Streams of encrypted files appeared on screens: video, audio, medical scans. Men in suits leaned closer, their confidence slipping. The system began to decrypt. Progress bar 3%. Then the lights snapped off. Emergency klaxons wailed, painting the room red. Power shifted to backup generators. The technician stammered. "It's not a malfunction. We're under attack." Automatic fire echoed through the concrete halls. The sound was disciplined, surgical. These weren't foreign raiders, they moved like American operators. Rourke was first to react, drawing his sidearm. Positions. Now he barked, pushing the suits toward cover. Laura flexed her wrists. The guard holding her hesitated. Whitaker gave the nod. "Unlock her. We need every gun." The restraints clicked free. Laura stripped the pistol from the guard's holster before he finished the motion. Her body lowered instinctively, scanning angles, listening to the rhythm of the gunfire. The first breach charge detonated down the hall. Smoke and shrapnel filled the corridor. Black-clad figures stormed through, their gear indistinguishable from elite U.S. units. Laura fired twice, each round clean. 2 bodies dropped before the intruders realized who was shooting back. She pivoted low, using the table as cover, sighting center mass at the third man. Rourke and Whitaker returned fire alongside her, but the attackers pressed hard. Grenades clattered across the floor. Laura kicked one back before it could arm, then dragged a stunned aide behind cover. "This is a kill team," she hissed. "They're here for the evidence." Pike clutched the capsule, knuckles white. "Keep them away from this." The fight spilled into the corridor. Narrow walls magnified every gunshot. Laura shifted tactics, moving like a ghost. She used reflections off metal panels, ricocheting shots with uncanny precision. Sidearm or sniper rifle. It didn't matter. Her body remembered every lesson from a dozen battlefields. She ducked low, slammed a fallen intruder against the wall, and wrenched his carbine free. The barrel flashed, dropping another assailant mid-stride. Yet the wave didn't stop. They weren't here to survive. They were here to silence. And then he appeared. At the far end of the corridor, framed by the emergency lights, walked a man Laura knew too well. Colonel Adrian Cole, the asset from Iron Anvil, the man who had led her team into the Syrian trap. His hair was grayer now, but his eyes burned with the same arrogance. "Jessica Hayes," he said, using the name she had buried. "The one who got away." His voice was calm, almost proud. Laura's weapon leveled instantly. Her finger twitched on the trigger. Cole raised a hand, as if humoring her. "You survived. That makes you unique. Do you know what we accomplished with Iron Anvil 11 subjects pushed beyond human breaking points? Pain thresholds raised, interrogation resistance perfected. You call them comrades. I call them progress." Her jaw clenched. "You butchered them." "No," Cole replied smoothly. "I refined them. Acceptable losses for science. And you, Phantom, you're proof it worked. The perfect soldier, hiding in plain sight." Laura's stomach twisted. rage tempered only by years of discipline. You sold us out for a lab experiment. He stepped closer, flanked by armed men, and the results were extraordinary. But you're more valuable alive than dead. Hand me the capsule. Let's continue the program properly this time. Behind her, the technician whispered frantically, "Upload's begun again. 2%. It's going global." Laura kept her pistol steady, but her mind raced. She had to buy time. She spoke louder, drawing Cole's attention. "If you truly believed in your science, you wouldn't need to kill witnesses." He smirked. "Not kill, erase." He gestured. His men surged forward. Gunfire erupted once more. Laura moved like liquid, ducking and firing in controlled bursts. Every bullet was deliberate. Bodies crumpled around her, but more flooded in. Rourke slammed an attacker against the wall, knife flashing in close combat. Whitaker dragged Pike toward safety, her expression iron. The corridor became chaos, smoke and muzzle flashes turning it into a strobe-lit nightmare. Laura pressed against cover, blood trickling from a graze along her arm. The upload counter ticked slowly upward, 30%, 45. Too slow. Cole's voice carried over the battle. "Do you really think you can stop me with a pistol and a few ghosts of conscience? You're one woman against the machine." Laura leaned out, firing 3 precise shots that dropped his escorts. Then Cole himself lifted a rifle, sighted on her chest, and another rifle cracked from behind him. Captain Rourke, breathing hard, stood at the end of the hall. His bullet punched through Cole's side, spinning him. Laura seized the moment. She shifted her sights and put a second round through his chest. Cole collapsed, shock frozen on his face. The corridor fell silent except for the alarm. The last attackers melted away, retreating as quickly as they had come. Laura exhaled, lowering her weapon. Blood pooled around Cole's body. His final words were faint, almost reverent. "You were my greatest creation." The upload counter hit 100%. Files streamed across every major intelligence network, NSA, CIA, FBI, and foreign allies. The evidence was no longer a secret. Phantom's proof of betrayal, torture, and corruption had gone global. There was no bearing it now. Laura holstered the pistol, chest heaving. She looked at Rourke, his hands still shaking around the rifle. For the first time that day, he didn't look like a captain. He looked like a man who had finally seen the cost of blind obedience. In the heart of Raven facility, the truth had broken free, and the ghost of Iron Anvil had finally struck back. 6 months later, the morning sky above Arlington was overcast. Rows of white headstones stretched in perfect silence, a field of memory etched in stone. Laura Kane stood among them, her hands buried in the pockets of her coat. Before her lay 11 markers, each carved with names once buried under false reports. Families had gathered here weeks earlier, finally told the truth of how their sons had died. No more polite lies. No more folded flags delivered with half-truth condolences. The scandal that followed Raven facility had shaken Washington to its core. Dozens of officials were indicted, stripped of rank or marched in front of cameras in disgrace. Entire programs were dismantled, their budgets erased, their files declassified. For the first time, Iron Anvil had been called by its true name, Betrayal. Laura traced the letters on one headstone, remembering the men who had pulled her from fire, who had never come home. Their ghosts were quieter now, but not gone. Behind her, measured footsteps broke the silence. Captain Mark Rourke appeared in full dress uniform, cap tucked under his arm. He stood at attention for a long moment, then moved closer. "They're offering you full reinstatement," he said softly. "Your choice of command. Hell, they'd hand you a star if you wanted it." His voice carried none of the arrogance she once knew. Laura didn't look up. Her gaze stayed on the stone. "I've got work already." Rourke frowned. What work? She turned at last, eyes steady. "Cleaning rifles. Someone has to keep them ready. A soldier is only alive if his weapon fires when it's needed." For once, Rourke didn't argue. He only nodded, accepting her refusal as truth. He knew better than to press. They stood together in silence until he finally walked away, leaving Laura alone with the rows of graves. As the wind shifted, she moved toward another headstone at the far edge. It belonged to Sophie Ramirez. The young recruit had re-enlisted after Fort Braddock, driven by the belief that survival demanded purpose. She had died 3 months ago in Afghanistan, shielding her squad from an IED blast. Her courage had saved lives, but the ground took hers. Laura knelt, fingers brushing the cool marble. At the base of the grave sat a small package wrapped in plain brown paper. No return mark, no signature. She opened it carefully. Inside lay a false tooth identical to the one she had carried for years. Next to it, a folded scrap of paper bore 6 words, scrawled in rough ink. Iron Anvil was only the beginning. They know you're alive. Be ready. Her grip tightened. A chill ran down her spine, sharper than the wind. Whoever left it knew her past. Whoever left it knew her secret. She slipped the capsule into her pocket. As she rose, her phone vibrated. The screen lit with an encrypted signal, the kind that bypassed every civilian tower. She hesitated, then answered. "Phantom," a voice said on the line. "Calm. Urgent. Black Site 12 is active. It's happening again." Laura's eyes swept across the cemetery, rows of sacrifices stretching into mist. 11 names carved in white stone, 1 name freshly added, and behind them, countless more who still believed the system would protect them. She spoke slowly, each word etched with finality. Some ghosts never die. They wait, and when war begins again, they rise. The line clicked dead. She slid the phone away, pulling her coat tighter against the chill. As she walked back toward the gates, the city skyline shimmered faintly in the distance. America looked calm on the surface, but beneath it the old currents still churned. Programs reborn, secrets hidden under new names. Her shadow stretched long across the grass. Once, she had tried to bury Phantom, to live quietly, unseen, but the world had not let her go. At Sophie's grave, the wind lifted the paper scrap, carrying it into the air. It tumbled, weightless, before vanishing into the horizon like a warning carried forward. Laura didn't look back. Her pace was steady, each step carrying her further from peace, closer to inevitability. In her pocket, the capsule pressed cold against her palm. A reminder, a call to arms, a weight she could never set down. Arlington faded behind her. Ahead, only shadows and the promise of another battlefield.